Hey, my comic book friends. It is I, Sleepy Reader, aka Damien. This is another one of my comic book thoughts videos. I haven't done one for 3 weeks, so I've got comics. I've got 32, 33 comics that I read in the past 3 weeks that I'm gonna try to talk about really quickly, relatively speaking. Um, so yeah, I've got them all laid out in front of me in different piles. I've got superheroes, I've got detective crime stories, I've got slice of life, I've got science fiction, I've got fantasy sword and sorcery, I've got horror and miscellaneous weird stuff in these different piles, and I kind of slightly rank them in each pile by the lesser to most favorite. Um, in the pile. I have been watching a lot of Comics Curing Cancer donation videos where Rob shows all the donations that have come in that will be auctioned off on October 4th through the 6th. And I found them fun to watch, so I made a playlist, which I'm putting down here. And in that playlist also is more information about the Comics Curing Cancer, like more links and stuff. Also, I'll include a link to the GoFundMe for Jen from Comics Will Break Your Heart in her ongoing fight against cancer. She needs our help as much as we can give. So, yeah, I'd say the overall thing is there were lots of incredibly imaginative stuff in these comics, especially visually. Some kind of pushing way out to the edges of their creativity. Like really exciting to see some of these artists really push themselves. And also, I'd say there's continuing this thread of quite a few comics that aren't giving me enough clues as to what's going on in the story that leave me confused, leaving me feel like a puzzled old man. Um, the funny thing is, some of those I really enjoy anyway, and then some others it just ruins it for me. Um, so let me get loaded up on some caffeine because I my brain needs that. And I'll start with the what I'm calling slice of life. I don't know if that's really accurate, but because for instance, Jeff Lemire's Major Arcana issue number 1, it feels slice of lifey, but there is a hint of maybe there's some magic coming. So we'll see. I found myself. I'm gonna have to turn this fancy background off, I guess. I thought it might work longer. But so you will, whoops, I'm struggling to turn it off. You will see my real background, the plain old sleepy house. So I found myself really enjoying Lemire's artwork, which over the years I've sort of been on and off whether I enjoy his sort of scratchy, less traditional style. But I really enjoyed the artwork and the color, which I think he has painted himself. It's a story of a woman coming back to the town where she grew up, just sucked back in by some family matter. And that's a very familiar Jeff Lemire storyline in his indie comics. And so I felt a little less excited by it. I'll probably try one more issue to see, but given the huge number of comics I'm trying to consume, it may not make the pull list. But it's not a bad comic. Um, I had fun reading Archie the Decision. I'm not sure when this came out, but I just became aware of it and I saw it at my shop. At the con, the artist Dan Parent, who I like a lot, was selling copies for $10. Maybe it was because of the signatures, but this is a 290 399 book. And it's written by Tom King, and it's a fun Archie story where he flips a coin to decide between Betty and Veronica, and the coin just starts rolling down through the city, and a large cast of characters get involved, just curious to see what the result will be. I kind of guessed what the result would be from reading it, but also I'd had it spoiled, but I won't say here. But it's a fun little romp if you feel like just a little bit of Archie. My my fandom of Dan Parent continues. He keeps his art very simple, but he is a very effective storyteller. And so it's always fun to read a an Archie that he's involved in. Okay, and then two more that I'm calling slice of life, but this one here is really on the edge. It's definitely a fantasy, but in a slice of life kind of format. And this is the return of the Henry and Glenn series by Tom Neely. It's published by Microcosm Press, and it's only a few comic book stores carry it, I think, but two in my area that I've seen. And I just loved this. If you haven't heard of it before, that Tom Neely has made up this imaginary world where Henry Rollins and Glenn Danzig of the group Danzig, and of Samhain and the Misfits, and Glenn and Henry Rollins has both got his solo career and is famous for his years in Black Flag and for his spoken word concerts and all of that. Um, anyway, in here, these two iconic rock and roll people are gay lovers who live in a nice little house. Well, not so nice sometimes, and have pets and neighbors. But and this centers around their new cat, which is a hairless Egyptian cat, which loves Henry and really does not take to Glenn very well at all. Um, so anyway, it's just wild and crazy. Inside, he kind of gives you the visual clue that he based the way he draws Henry Rollins on Dick Tracy, and the way he draws Glenn Danzig off of the Little Lulu style. And Glenn Danzig is the kind of runaway character here. He's just so much fun. But the relationship between the two of them is a lot of fun. Their neighbors are their neighbors are a satanic version of Hall and Oates. John Waters shows up. I think RuPaul. He changes the name on some characters and not on others. Um, and he's playing, with a lot of visuals from different comic books and comic book history and stuff. So it's a delightful kind of thing. Obviously, means more to you if you catch all the cultural touchstones. And there might be some I don't catch, but I catch a lot, and I really enjoy it. I have been a fan of both of those two gentlemen's rock and roll at various times in my life. And then I bought all three issues of Hate Revisited. I never read Hate, and I figured I probably shouldn't dive in, but I was hearing such enthusiastic things from everyone else who's reading it here on YouTube that I decided to take the plunge, and I just had the greatest time. This is hilarious. I guess it is slice of life, but life that is amped up in a cartoony kind of way. You can tell just by the drawing style of Peter Baggy, and the comedy really runs that perfect line between being about real life and being kind of absurd, and bringing the two together in ways that is very relatable. It's not as political as you would think from this cover. So there's not a lot of politics in it. It probably leans a little away from Trump, but they don't go into that so much, for those of you who might be worried about that. Um, and I think you could pick up individual issues. Reading all three in a row, though, was a great delight. It was like eating potato chips. I just couldn't stop. And I can't wait for the next issue. In fact, this reminds me, I need to tell them to put that on my pull. So two big wins there for kind of outside the American mainstream of comics. Let's see, what shall I do next? Superheroes. Speaking of the American mainstream of comics, I include Space Ghost among superheroes, and this is number 5. I guess for the first 4 issues, I was really enjoying it, and I just felt a little bored by this issue, like it felt by the numbers a bit rote. Um, they're walking a fine line again, I guess, of trying to do something that's a little more adult comic, but stay true to the spirit of Space Ghost. And I guess they're doing it fine, but I just felt less excited this time around. So I'm not sure if I'll stick with Space Ghost. Maybe I should switch over to Johnny Quest, which is started coming out. And then I picked up the second issue of Power Fantasy, even though I was not a big fan. There's the crazy back cover of Power Fantasy. It's all different languages. Um, and I was not a big fan of the first issue of Power Fantasy. In fact, it was one of those ones where until the very end of the comic, I wasn't sure what was going on. And it was a really tough read to get through, not knowing what was going on. Um, this one, the story gels a bit more. So I picked it up just because I go to the comic book store and I get excited about comics, and I sometimes grab things I wasn't planning to grab. But the story gels a little more, but it's more apparent that this is a adult or not adult because it is already adult, an alternative take on the whole X-Men situation, where you have um, a large number of superpowered people, and do they kind of live separately from humanity, or do they try to work with humanity, and other issues like that. And I thought that while reading it, and then Kieran Gillen in the back talks about how he'd come back to Marvel yet again to write more X-Men, and this is stuff, but there was lines beyond which he couldn't go at Marvel. So this is kind of his chance to do that. The art by Casper Wingard is chef's kiss. It's just so good. So that makes this an extra tempting thing, despite kind of a slightly annoying writing style. So I don't know. I don't think I'll put it on my pull list, but I might continue to grab it off the shelves. We'll see. I totally, with issue one of Jenny Sparks, said I'm going to wait and read it digitally, because it just comes out a month later on the DC app. But I loved this cover so much, it sort of sparked hope in me. And again, I was in that mood to pick up comics. So I think this is about 32, 33, 34 pages long. So it's a pretty hefty story. And there's entertaining bits, but a lot of it feels like Tom King is doing these bits to stretch out what is a simpler story, perhaps. I don't know how many issues it's supposed to be, but he's usually doing a mini series, right? And so he's, yeah, it felt stretching. The art by Jeff Spokes is really nice. I think Spokes is doing his own coloring. It's very reminiscent of Terry Dodson and shoot, forgot the other guy's name. But anyway, um, still a annoying character. The characters are saying the F word, although just as in garbled, letters, but they're swearing in every other sentence or even every sentence. And it just starts to seem kind of stupid. But one thing I can't quite figure out the timeline. Is this supposed to take place in the past, maybe just after 9/11, or is it supposed to connect 9/11 to what's happening in the now of, say, 2024? Um, that's annoying. Gotta turn that off. I didn't mean to turn it on. Um, uh, so we do get kind of a little more about Jenny Sparks being alive in the 21st century, when she's supposed to just live the 100 years of the 20th century. She's the century baby. Um, but what her powers are, or why she has such a high opinion of herself, or anything like that, is not yet clear. So I don't, I still mean to save this for a digital read, but we'll see. Tin Can Society was very good. Really nice artwork. I'm lumping it under the superhero thing. I think in part it is a variation on Tony Stark Iron Man, but with a really neat twist. How do I'm sorry that there's so much glare from the window behind me. Maybe I will move this again, because before I had shifted things over because the sun was in my eyes, but now the sun's gone behind a cloud. Um, Oh, here comes the sun in my eyes again. Anyway, really nice artwork. And I thought this was going to be a slice of life thing. It's about five friends who meet in high school, and one of them is got some severe disabilities, but he's a genius, and he eventually turns those disabilities, and dealing with his disabilities, into making himself sort of a celebrity millionaire like Tony Stark, or billionaire, or whatever, super inventor, maybe a little like Elon Musk, but more Tony Stark. And he does create for himself kind of a Iron Man like suit, and now he's dead, and it's a mystery, and the friends are called back. So it all has the familiar stuff, but done in a different way. It's quite a cool comic. I don't know if I'll stick. It's probably another one that I'll pick up and one more issue before I decide to stick with it on my pull list. The Pedestrian, I still get a big kick out of this one, which mixes this kind of oddball superhero, the Pedestrian, who may or may not really be a superhero. We still are beginning to learn things in with a very realistic slice of life kind of world. But we also have a villain showing up here. The Pedestrian has the walk sign on him. Someone else has the hand that tells you to stop, to not walk across the street, at least here in the US. Um, so and there's something more surreal starts happening at the end of the issue. So I assume we will learn more as it goes along. But this is just kind of a really cool, unique, taking it, building up characters and doing something interesting. I could almost feel it's like an heir to Steve Gerber comics, like what was the Omega the Unknown or something like that. It has that kind of vibe to me. And I'm counting this issue number 7 of Santos Sisters as very much a superhero comic. It's like the Archies become superheroes, those kind of comics, but with an adult flavor, not a really strong adult flavor, but it's there. Sexuality is in the background, and alcohol use and marijuana use and all of that. But it's mostly still light fun. They say ages 13 plus, be prepared to show ID. um, Anyway, and it comes on this nice newsprint paper, and it's kind of perfect for what it is. They've created their own little thing out of Archie and kind of slice of life stories and whatever else is in their imagination, and just kind of uh, so this was a really good issue. For a while I thought maybe I was getting tired of the boozy bees, tired of the Santos Sisters, but now I feel like it's picked back up, and there's tons of fun, silly characters, and the fantasy and the real life melding together in interesting ways is really cool. Um, I think it's best in this cheap feeling comic book format, and it has these fun ads in it, which are real ads, but just kind of goofy and out there. And but it's about to come out in a hardback edition. There's some more ads from Fantagraphics Books, so that will be interesting. I think I will prefer just to have the pulpy paper version. And I guess the top of my superhero list here was Barfly. I'm not sure when this may be like a month old or something. It's got fantastic art by Ryan Brown, who worked on the colors with the co-colorist. Script by Kyle Starks. I know I've read a number of Kyle Starks books. I can't remember what. And also some plotting assist from Patton Oswalt and Jordan Blum, the creators of the Minor Threats world. And Barfly is a henchman who was created by some evil insect-themed villain, and now that villain's in jail, and he's just trying to make his way in the world, working at a fast food restaurant where he's mistreated as an under-the-counter worker, and trying to get involved in some petty crime, but it's not going very well. So overall, fun little romp. This Minor Threats world and this issue make me think of kind of an updated version of Astro City, but also focusing on the lives of the minor villains, thus Minor Threats. And just with the art and the wacky storytelling here, this one is particularly fun. And Minor Threats is going to be expanding its universe with more creators on it. I think there's even going to be like an anthology book, and there's going to be work by Brian Michael Bendis and Matt Fraction and Mike Allred and stuff. So this Barfly has me really looking forward to seeing what more people will do with this. Um, the superhero genre is amazing how endlessly flexible it is. People can think of it as very limited, but somehow creators have found ways to just do it in so many different ways. So maybe it's a less flexible genre, sort of crime mystery books. I have a few of those. Dead Eyes is a new one from Jerry Duggan. Dead Eyes, Empty Frames, Jerry Duggan, and the art by John McCrae, who I think did some great work with Garth Ennis, maybe at DC. I'm trying to remember, but I really like the art in here. But the story fumbled around. It seems like there's a good idea about this sort of mysterious criminal who is making money while undermining the work of other criminals, perhaps. So he's sort of half doing good, half just working for himself, named Dead Eyes. And so it could be good. Maybe once it gets rolling, it would be good. I don't know if I'll give it a second issue try. By the end of the story, I understood where they were going and what kind of book they were doing with it. Um, but that clunky way the most of the story was put together, you think in particular you want your first issue to really zing and sing, and it didn't do that for me. um Profane, I really liked in the earlier issues, but I'm starting to get kind of bored with it. It's very repetitive with its situation about the fictional detective now in the real world, trying to resolve matters with the murder of his writer and the evil character out in the world and everything. But it feels like it's going around in circles. So I'm assuming it'll end soon, so I'm sticking with it. But if I find out it's going to take a long time, if there's a lot more issues, I should probably drop it. Red and the Black, I decided it's kind of a film, not film, cocaine gangs and undercover operatives and people who just got out of prison who are being forced to do things they maybe don't really want to do by the cops. Um, but this issue went more sort of in directions that I found a little harder to believe. Like I guess a detective kind of or crime kind of story usually wants to kind of make you feel rooted in the real world, even if it's not totally realistic. But this one just went a little too wacky for me. I was just trying the second issue. I liked the first issue more. So I think it won't go on my pull list. And also just because I only need so much crime fiction in my life. And speaking of crime fiction, I'm still really loving Sam and Twitch. I would say this issue was a notch, just a little notch below all the others, because there were a few plot details that I had trouble grasping onto whereas in all the other issues I was coasting along in terms of that problem. But still love the way it's written and the artwork by Simon Kondransky, and still marveling how much I like Todd McFarlane's writing on crime fiction. Um, so maybe I just need to go back and read the last issue, and maybe there's some plot points that I forgot from the last issue that are taken for granted in this issue. But still really good stuff. So of the crime stories, Sam and Twitch wins for me. And then let's see. We'll go to science fiction next. So I wasn't sure at first, but The Body Trade is a science fiction story of sorts, or perhaps a science fiction horror. There's some new technology, and people are trading in bodies. And this father, who maybe is a recovering drug addict, I'm guessing, and is considered to have caused his daughter's coma from a car accident, but we're not given all the details. He's like, where's her body? And he's trying to track down her body, and so that's slowly uncovering the science fiction or horror element here. I really like the art. Um, I I don't know. I wasn't super excited by the story, so we'll see. Maybe depending on my mood, I might try another issue. It's a Mad Cave book. At the moment, I'm trying every Mad Cave book that comes along, It's not bad, but I don't know if it's enough to keep me. I probably should have put this one behind it actually, but Cruel Universe, I love that cover so much. Um, this issue of Cruel Universe wasn't as much fun for me as issue number one, particularly the first story I thought was kind of irritating. We have the twist, but it's not a twist because it's at throughout the story that humanity now raises other humans as cattle and eats them. And then the twist at the end of the story seemed dumb. Um, I did like this one about someone who got cancer and was a janitor at this high-tech biology research place, and they use an experiment on him and he can start predicting the future, and they play out how that's going to work. So that was my favorite story of this issue. Who wrote and drew that? Someone named Ben Winters wrote it, and Leo Max, that name sounds familiar, drew it, and that was really good. Um, Visually, this one called Ray Gun was fun, but I thought it lacked something. The guy gets a ray gun and then he just goes around and kills everybody with it, from an alien crash site, and things don't go well for him. But yeah, it had fun art and the story was okay. But I'm definitely sticking with Cruel Universe, and I've the epitaphs from the Abyss. I'm kind of letting that slide. Although they both have really great covers. I'm getting really frustrated with Precious Metal. Now, maybe I'll sing a completely different tune when I go back and read all 6 issues together when it all comes out. This is issue 4. I often find if there's something with really great art, but I can't follow the story, or I don't like the story, I can enjoy it for about 3 issues, and then I really lose patience and don't want to continue. So if this art weren't so brilliant, and I wasn't hearing other people say how great the story seems to them, I probably would drop this. But the art is brilliant, and people are saying that they think it's a fantastic story. So I definitely want to keep collecting it and then read the whole thing together again. But I'm just missing too many details, and it's frustrating me to the point where part of me just wants to just look at the pictures and not keep reading. Um, which is weird because there are other comics here where I don't understand everything and I'm fine with it. But with this, there's something about the way this is done that makes me feel irritated that I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's the level at which, scene by scene, I don't know what's going on, compared to things where I can't make all the connections, but a lot of what's going on still makes sense to me. Distillery with their oversized comics that cost $9 and I think they're about 48 pages long. This is a new one called Time Waits with script by Chip Zdarsky and David Brothers together, and art by Marcus Toe and Matt Wilson coloring. Matt Wilson's probably the superstar here. Um, he's he's always been a really good colorist, sometimes better than others for me, but I really liked the coloring in this comic. And the story seems like a decent science fiction time travel story, but it hasn't developed very much in this issue. Um, and I heard someone say this is only 3 issues, so I'm a little nervous. I can't tell from this issue if it's just an okay time travel story or if it'll turn into something I love. But I think I like it enough and it's only 3 issues, even though they're $9 an issue, that I will probably get the whole thing. I really, really liked this issue of Geiger. This was a different one. It was from the point of view of the two-headed dog, who I had thought died in the last issue, but I had seen this cover, so I knew he didn't really die. Um, but he sort of goes off on his own silent adventure. Um, it's not funny at all, but it makes me think of the adventures of Referto and the back of Gru. Um, but so we get kind of a story that is mostly wordless, and it's masterfully told. It's really good, and inventive and visually fun. So really love this issue of Geiger, and surprised me because I had this idea that Geiger was kind of being going to be the follow the same pattern issue after issue, which was a fun pattern. But this breaks the pattern. It does something else with it. So I really like that. Also, in the science fiction world, I really am enjoying Grendel Devil's Crucible Defiance issue 3. And I'm really glad to know it's really 3 of 4, but it's really a 12 issue miniseries, which is a good length of time to really explore this future Earth where the Grendels have been expunged, and then our Grendel Prime comes back to Earth, and there's vampires and all other kinds of weird things. The vampires are quite gruesome and quite naked, testicles flying. Uh, but there's just it's very point A to point B kind of storytelling, which I really appreciate, but full of inventive visuals and details along the way. So it's kind of a good old-fashioned adventure with plenty of meat on the bone, I feel like, in terms of creativity, visually and story-wise. So, I mean, this is just the first 3 issues of 12 issues, but so far it's looking really good. Okay, let me talk about some of the my little stack of fantasy books, or mostly sword and sorcery, but other bits of fantasy also. Autumn Kingdom is yet another metafictional comic book. There's a writer of fantasy novels, and then there's a real fantasy world that comes and gets him and his wife, and his kids have to come rescue them. I'm a big fan of Christopher Mitten's art. I I might not be finding good examples, but I felt like the coloring wasn't quite right for his art. And I felt like this is a Colin Bunn story. It's perfectly fine, but so far from this first issue, it feels like there's nothing new or different or some special angle on it. And between that and the not liking the way, because I sort of came for Christopher Mitten, but not liking the way Mitten's art is served here, I'm not sure if I continue. Probably one where I'll pick up another issue. This is a Oni Press. And then Fire and Ice. I think it's been it feels like 6 months, maybe it's been less, since issue 2 of Fire and Ice. And so I thought I kind of remembered what was going on, but this issue we're entirely plunged into fight scene after fight scene, battle after battle, and they are beautiful to behold, but I can't remember how it connects to what I remember. There seemed like there was a slow buildup in the previous 2 issues. So I feel like I've skipped some issues to get to these big battle scenes, but maybe I just don't remember. Um, so it's a visual feast, but kind of hard at it with this gap to feel connected at all to what's going on. There's a lot of fun stuff in Conan Battle for the Black Stone. The Conan parts seemed a bit repetitious to things we've already seen in the main Conan stories, like in the first arc and stuff. Um, but I really liked the way they brought in all the other Robert E. Howard characters, and so that's kind of the part of the book that I liked a lot. The coloring is really fun. The art is pretty good. Um, Everything pales a little bit compared to Del Toro, is that his name? Anyway, the main artist on the regular Conan book, but they do a decent job. So I'm looking forward to more issues. I think this is coming out monthly. Is it 5 issues or 6 issues? So we'll see how. I'm still waiting to see what happens when they bring all these different Robert E. Howard characters together in one story. They're all still off in their own slots. I think you could pick this up and start from here, but I think it also would help to get the 0 issue or whatever it was, the free comic book day issue, and read the Savage Sword of Conan #4 would also help. So it's best for people who've been reading all the Conan material that Titan has been putting out. The Moon is Following Us by Daniel Warren Johnson and Riley Rossmo is a great example of all the visual inventiveness that I've been experiencing these past few weeks. Riley Rossmo draws the bulk of it in the fantasy world. This is one of your stories of we've got a real world portion, and then people who go into a virtual world and have their fantasy adventures. So in that way, it doesn't feel that special. There's a bit of a mystery as to like they have a real goal of saving their daughter, I think, but we don't know why they have to do this to save their daughter. We do see their daughter at the end of the story, and I guess she's in a coma or trapped inside the virtual world. So it's a fun read with incredible art. Um, Riley Rossmo, like I said, draws the fantasy sections, and Daniel Warren Johnson, the main writer, but they're co-creators of it, uh, draws what are so far just a few pages of the real life world. But a huge visual treat. Helena Windhorn is a really, really interesting and fun and visually stunning comic. This issue focuses a lot on Helen's training so that she can live up to her grandfather's standards that would allow her to be a full sort of adventure hero in their fantasy portal world that they can go into. Um, and the the framing device continues, but it's hard to see where Tom King is going with this framing device. This time, we've got somebody who has bought the tapes that tell the story at a comic book convention, and who really knows nothing about the material that he's picked up at all. So anyway, I'm curious to see where this goes. I think it's only 5 or 6 issues, so we're near the end, which is in a way sad. And then finally, kind of unfair to compare to this, I'm so in the bag for Gru. Any half decent Gru is genius stuff to me, and this issue is no it's a very good issue. It's no exception, and it has these great double page spreads with so much to look in. But every panel has so much to look in it, since it has a lot more of the minstrel in the this minstrel character who makes up songs about Gru. On every panel, the what's on the end of his lute changes, so that alone can keep you entertained for a long time. But Sergio Aragones has not lost it at all with the crazy, crowded, inventive art that he does. We just sort of take it for granted when he does it. But another hilarious story. It's about destroying villages and and about tourism for ruins. Okay, last but not least is my stack of horror slash bizarreness slash fantasy sci-fi in there too. Um, I was not such a big fan of the Principles of Necromancy book 3. I think I have book 4 somewhere, but I've misplaced it, so I haven't read it yet. I really liked issue 2. Issue 1 left me feeling queasy, but it was still kind of intriguing. This takes it in a different direction. Like I thought it was going to be a series of one-off stories, but now it feels like it might be a continuing story with an overarching conflict and everything like that. That may interest me less than the one and done stories, but we'll see because I'll dig up issue 4 soon. Um, Usually, very top of my list, Ice Cream Man. This one was a little bit. It's certainly worth reading and everything, but it didn't have the feel of your average Ice Cream Man story, and it didn't. I don't know. It didn't have that satisfying completeness to it. It feels like the beginning of a whole story arc. I don't know if it is or not, and it feels like it wants to finally go back and tie things together, the few little threads that we thought uh, Prince, the writer Prince, had given up on, and that he had just decided to make this anthology book with lots of one and done stories, which I think is where his great talent lies. So anyway, we'll see what happens next. I'm certainly still a very happy reader of Ice Cream Man. Then we got Infernals, a series that I think ended too quickly. I really liked a lot of the concepts, loved the painted art and the weird family dynamics of the family of the Antichrist, of the bringer of the apocalypse. And we get some very clever images of Satan and we get some clever twists and stuff. But the story overall feels like the characters, this ending would have meant more if there'd been a few extra issues building up the characters even more, and the conflict between all the different sides. So yeah, I still am very glad I read the Infernals, but could have been better. Really enjoyed this. Mark Spears Monsters. It was not available. It was only available at the third comic book store I went to. No, the fourth comic book store I went to. But it has really cool painted looking art. I'm not sure how much is Photoshop and how much is painting. There are scenes here where I thought, oh, that looks like he had friends pose for him, and then he kind of doctored the photos, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure how he did it. But it's a really fun story that ties into Universal Monster type of things. Uh, it feels like there's a bunch of different threads that are established in this first issue, and it's hard to know where the story's going yet. So I kind of love this first issue, but I'm reserving my judgment for future issues. And but it's definitely pull list worthy. And I love a good monster story, and if this can pull it off with all these different monsters and sort of horror lore, it'll be really great. And I really continue to love Paranoid Gardens. This is the ultimate example of a story where I don't really understand everything, but I'm still enjoying it step by step by step. Individual scenes make sense to me, but how all it's very Grant Morrison in what all of this really means and what this world really is yet to be revealed. And um, we have clues that we're building up, and it feels like we will get answers as we go along. And of course, I love the Chris Weston art and the colors here, which I think are by our old favorite Dave Stewart. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm pretty in love with this series from Dark Horse. It's weird. Some Dark Horse books have really thin paper. This has a very nice cover, and the paper seems pretty substantial. Um, I don't know what that's about. Maybe some books they decide to cut corners on more than others. Okay, here's a really chunky book for $8, and it's a great deal. Um, it's also a bit confusing, but it's one of my favorite books that I read this time around. Ultra Mega by James Herron and yet again Dave Stewart. um I don't know why he chooses, like, it's been, I think, 2 years, a year, at least a year, but maybe 2 years since the last four issues of Ultra Mega came out. I don't know why he chooses to do these big fat issues rather than split it up into smaller issues and have it come out more often, but that's the way he's chosen to do it. Um, and talk about sort of visual inventiveness. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful blending of color and imaginative line art. There are bits and pieces of the story that I couldn't fully connect together, but I have a sense they are coming together. And I remember enough of the previous story arc to sort of not be completely lost, but it would be great to go back and reread those first four issues. Um, but uh, artist James Herron just keeps topping himself, I think, in terms of his inventiveness with monsters. And and he's writing it too, and there's a lot of humor and a lot of just plain quirkiness. I love the final panel of this issue, which turned things on its head a bit, but I, of course, don't want to spoil that for you. Um, so yeah, this is a super delightful treat, but I guess it depends a bit on your sense of patience. And although I'm really impatient with things like precious metal, I seem to be able to be patient with this. I get just enough to keep going, but I can imagine other people might have trouble with that. So wild, wacky, super imaginative, lots and lots of monsters. Ultra mega. Um, yeah, so I think my top books, I would say, include all of this large section of books, include Ultra Mega and Paranoid Gardens. And I wrote them down here. Let's see if I can find the others in this giant stack. But Hate, another big favorite of this month, and Henry and Glenn. So I go from these sort of slice of life books to cartoony slice of life books to these wild fantasies and grew. Yeah, and grew. There's a lot of others that I really love, but if I had to pick the very top, these are the ones. Grew, which always delivers, and I'm in the Gru groove, right? I've read so much Gru that getting more good Gru immediately clicks in my brain. Okay, thanks for joining me. Check out the links below. Have a great comic reading week, and I hope to be back sooner than later.